Okay, I'd like to call to order the Town of Niskuna Conservation Advisory Council meeting. This is August 7th, 2024. Laura, could you please call the roll?
Okay. In person, we have Ellen Daviero and Simran Uturker, as well as Chairman Strayer. And online, we have Clark Henry from the Planning Department, Georgia Bonton, Chuck Petrowski, Ashok Ramasubramanian, and I believe that's it.
Okay, great. Do we have anybody up? Let's do the minutes first. We have the minutes of July 10th. Does anybody have any corrections or comments on those minutes?
Nope.
Anyone online?
Nope.
Okay, I make a motion that we adopt the minutes as written. Is there a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay, Laura, do we have anyone online that would like to address the committee?
Nope, we have no online people or written comments.
Okay, fine. Seeing no one else in the boardroom, I will close the privilege of the floor. So we have one EAF and a couple discussion items before we hit the Climate Smart Communities Task Force items. The first item we need to discuss is an environmental assessment form for a new zoning change proposal. This has to do with short-term rentals, and it sets guidelines for these rentals within the town. It is being adopted so that we have a fair control over these Airbnb or other such rentals in the property that protects both the rights of the owner and the local residents around the town. So it's a balance. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just ask if anybody had some comments. I went through it. I have some comments, but I'd like to ask other people if they had any comments that we needed to discuss about this ordinance.
Yeah, just one comment.
Yeah.
That was, I wasn't clear. I mean, I think it's a requirement that we have to look at it, but upon review, outside of the potential of more people maybe in an abode, should somebody actually rent something out, I'm not seeing where there's like a potential environmental or conservation impact. Within the law or within the rule as it's written right now. Did you see anything like that? Or
I have a couple comments.
Okay.
I don't think that they're necessarily an impact except for one. I just want to have a discussion on it.
Yeah, well, just to clarify that point, anytime you amend your zoning code, it is considered to have the potential to have an environmental impact. So New York
Good point.
State requires all zoning code reviews because the zoning code applies, to all properties and in the future, and affects a lot of things. That when you update your zoning code, it's required to go through the full seeker review every time.
Great. I agree with that process. Thank you.
Some zoning codes we've actually kicked around quite a bit. I think like the demolition code, we had a lot of comments on that and we went back and forth.
Yeah.
So it can happen. It doesn't have to happen, but it can.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments online? Ellen, did you have any?
Is your microphone on, Ellen? Are you talking into it? That's the direction. Yes.
I guess I didn't have any, I was like reading through this, I guess. I was trying to match it up with like how it was different than before. And so it was just a lot of, yeah. So I don't really have any comments right now.
Okay. I actually don't have a lot of comments, but I did have a couple that I'd just like to go through and seek clarification.
Mhm.
So on page 2, B2, there's a statement there that says the renewal application requirements shall be the same as the initial application requirements. So this has to do with the fact that you have to renew the permit every single year. And the reason why I've sort of flagged this is I'm interpreting this, that the rules that the person established the first application or received the first permit follow the rental property through forever.
Mhm.
So my question on that has to do with, they have to comply with certain zoning rules that are subsequently said in this document. So what happens if the town of Niskuna changes the zoning and it affects the short-term rentals either in a direct way or an indirect way? Does this part number 2 supersede that?
No, I don't think so. I can double check with the attorney, but
Okay.
the reason for B2, or even just that it renews every year, is that nothing's grandfathered in, essentially. So if you do change your short-term rental code in the future, upon renewals, then the new rules have to be met.
Well, that's what I thought, but when I read this sentence and it says the renewal application requirements shall be the same as the initial short-term application requirements. Were you talking about the applications or the rules that it can,
So, so in the application requirements, you have to do things such as provide a drawing of the
Okay.
off-street parking, and you have to have an inspection by the building inspector of emergency exits and fire systems and stuff like that. And like, I'll double check with the attorney, but really what it means is every year you have to submit a piece of paper that shows that you cleaned your chimney or whatever. And
Okay.
you have to resubmit your parking plan
Mhm.
every time. Like, you don't have to. A lot of renewals that we have in the town of Niskayuna, you just send your name in on a
Mhm.
piece of paper and say, here's my renewal. But in this particular instance, every year you're going to have to go through all of the renewal steps.
So if, for example, we now required a smoke detector, let's say, in the living room, in addition to the bedrooms, then the applicant, when they reapplied, would have to comply with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, you could say the renewal application requirements shall be the same as section, whatever the initial application requirements are.
Not being an attorney, Laura, I just am tripping.
Yeah, but you could say it's the same as section
Yep.
2C, so that
Mhm.
if section 2C changed,
Mm-hmm.
you'd have to be complying with section 2C. That's a really easy change.
Yep. Okay. I had a question about C, but I think I answered that, so I don't think that's important. Okay, the next item that I wanted to bring up was on page 6, item 3 under heading F, which is required off-street parking.
Mhm.
So the way I understand this is the applicant has to demonstrate that they have adequate parking, which is not the garage, but it could be the driveway and then off-street parking as well, based on their front footage.
Yeah, so this code says that that the rental units can't use on-street parking.
Okay,
And you're required to have, not counting your garage, the number of off-street parking, that you get calculated. So
okay,
if you were renting 2 rooms, you would require to be showing 3 off-street parking spots, not including the garage, on your property.
does that include the resident in that calculation?
It does not include the resident. I mean, there
So-
are some properties that don't have a garage, so
So the question I have is, suppose I was a resident, I was renting out a room, and I had 2 cars, and my driveway, like a lot of driveways, can only handle 2 cars. Would the expectation be that the owners would now be parking out on the street, or, so
Yeah,
the
that's a
the conflict I
fair
s-
question.
the conflict I see here, and if the owner wanted access all the time to pull in and pull out, they may not want their cars blocked.
No, that's a
In which
really
case,
fair
they would
question.
tell the person to park on the street, which I think would be problematic, because they might not park actually on the street. They might park in front of the neighbor's house instead of in front of their house. And in fact, when I was out in Utah this year, my son was in an Airbnb, and the resident specifically said, "I don't want you parking in my driveway, and I don't want you parking in front of my house." So he parked in front of a neighbor's house, which
Oh my God.
some people might not mind that, but there might be people that if they constantly have people in front of their house.
No, the intent of the code is to limit the impacts of short-term rentals on the neighborhood.
Yeah, that might be an
So-
impact.
It could be a loophole if you provide all the off-street parking to your guests, but you have 4 cars naturally in your parking lot, and then you just move all 4 of your cars
Right.
onto the street. Yeah, that's really fair. So I think we should revise that to somehow account for the
Everybody.
fact that a host has to be there and that a host is going to have their own car or cars.
Yep.
And related, and maybe this was embedded somewhere in the document, but I don't quite understand how that would ever be enforced. It's not like we pay for, it's not like we register our cars for on-street parking.
In some of the things in here are harder to enforce than other things.
Understood, yeah,
The noise is always a super difficult one to enforce.
right.
It comes and goes so quickly. It's sometimes hard to cite and find true violations. Still in there though, in case of an egregious violation. I think, if
That's fair.
if this was embedded in a neighborhood where there was a ton of on-street parking, it would be really hard because to know which car was associated
Yeah.
with which house. But it could be if there's a cul-de-sac and everybody has a giant driveway and all of a sudden there's a million cars parked out in the street, then in that case, it might be a lot easier to figure out the off-street parking.
I think that the way I look at it is if you don't close that loophole, you're setting us up for a potential problem. And whether you catch somebody or not, it is something that could be enforceable if it gets out of hand. You may not catch everybody that's doing it, but if there's a complaint, you might be able.
Yeah, that makes sense.
you might
Yeah,
be
there's
able
a
to
number
address
of
it.
tools in the toolbox, and this one may be harder to enforce in some situations, but in certain situations, it may be very obvious.
Yeah.
In which case, you'd want to have that, because then it could theoretically be an easy code to violate. It really is situationally dependent.
Right, and you're tying it to the application, so clearly the person is intending, to run a business where they're allowing people to stay in their homes or their properties, and one of the benefits to the customer of that business is the parking.
Mhm.
So it's not like you're having, your family over for, 4 days of Thanksgiving or something, and I guess we would have the snow issue or snow parking at that point. Let's just say 4th of July, and they wind up parking on the street for 4 nights. Clearly that's a different, we as residents don't have to apply for that. That's just people coming over. This
Right.
is clearly in order to get your license to do it or the approval to run your business, you have to abide by these obligations. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, because your family coming over on the 4th of July or for a graduation or a big birthday celebration,
That's different.
it only happens maybe once or twice a summer. But the concern here is that this situation can happen every single weekend if you have, if you have a desirable rental and it's filling up with people, then
Right.
it's not just the 4th of July that there's a lot of cars on the street. It's every weekend.
Right,
So it
right.
can be problematic.
Just out of curiosity, what's the number of, what's the percentage of this?
Short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals.
It seems to vary when we check on a couple of different sites. It varies between like 4 or 5 popping up and 10 or 12. Like the most I've ever seen is like 12 out of 8,000 housing units.
It's not the number of houses, but I think if you're a neighbor that's impacted adversely from
Yeah.
a person, then it's a big deal for the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
And it also, I've read a lot of articles about it and taken a decent amount of training on it. I mean, it may become a higher demand if you don't have the code in place. It's better to have the code in place now, although we already have some issues with some homes. We already do. But the practice of buying a home for a short-term rental in actuality across actually a lot of housing in New York is artificially raising the housing prices because an investor who's going to make money off the house is willing to pay more than someone who's going to live and send their kids to the school here. And so it creates actually a housing scarcity issue and an affordable housing issue as well. So there's a couple different reasons to adopt a code. One is to limit the negative impacts to the neighborhood. And another one is actually to try and combat some of the rising problems with affordability of housing.
And this has occurred in North Alba.
Yeah.
And that's what this code is based on, right, Laura?
Yeah, it is loosely based on North Elba. North Elba is a seasonal community that actually does want a number of short-term rentals in balance with their neighborhood, whereas Niskayuna is a bedroom community, so the kind of outcome of the code is different goal. So it's like reasonably more strict than North Elba because in a bedroom community, the impacts of a short-term rental can be felt much stronger as opposed to a seasonal community where some of the businesses are depending on the people coming in.
Can
Yeah.
I ask just one other question? Sorry, I don't know very much about this, but had a friend who they rented their home out for like a year or 2 years when they went abroad.
Mhm.
So do they follow these same rental procedures? I mean, I think they went through like a real estate agent.
So in this particular case, it would be hard for them if they lived in a normal residential neighborhood in Niskayuna because the only place that you can have an unhosted rental is like a neighborhood commercial zone. You have to be in the house when you're renting these short-term rentals, and that's
Okay. So say if somebody decides to house swap or they're going to go to Spain for the year, they can't rent their home anymore.
they could not unless they left sort of a family member there to stay in the house while it was being
Ah.
hosted. Yeah.
That actually, I think we should look at because if you work for a university, you might have a sabbatical
Mhm.
and you would probably want to rent your house for a year because a house that's vacant, insurance rates will go up.
So-
Other than losing that,
So just to put it in context though, that would mean you couldn't put it on a short-term rental site for a year. It doesn't mean that you couldn't rent it. If you were on sabbatical for a year, you could rent it to someone for a year. You're just not allowed to rent it every weekend to a different person in that neighborhood.
yeah. No.
oh,
Yeah.
okay,
So
then,
short-term
Right,
rental.
it's a short-term rental, so
Short-term-
30 days or consecutive nights or less,
Yeah.
right?
But long-term rentals are still.
Yeah,
fine.
so I mean,
Yeah.
if you know that you're going to be gone for a period of time, and honestly, that's better for you. You can rent to a person for longer than 30 days or, a family or whatever, and then they would be paying you monthly rent, hopefully.
Right, you don't need to be there.
But you do not need to be there for long-term rentals, but
For
for
long-
short-term rentals. And so the issue is
Okay, so
short-term
there's a whole
rentals,
different code for long-term.
they
rentals.
tend to have much less investment in, well, let's be honest, they have no investment in the community, right? Long-term rentals, even if it's half a year, they're still every day going to that home, every day saying hi to the neighbors. That is not very impactful to a neighborhood, whereas 30 days or less, and it typically tends to be, 5 days or less.
Yeah.
You've got different reasons for renting the home
Yeah, no, I
happening
understand.
all the time. So you're not taking income away from people necessarily,
Right.
but the long-term rentals are fine. It's just the short-term rentals.
okay, that's fine. I misinterpreted what you
No,
said.
it's a good question, and I bet you it will be one that will come up. And so, when this resolution passes, or I mean, when the code gets embedded, obviously some kind of clarification, I bet you, or maybe something on the website, Laura, in the future that explains the difference between just, those scenarios,
Mhm.
long-term rental versus a short-term rental. And I noticed that, and people ask, well, what's the difference between a short-term rental and an Airbnb or a B&B as opposed to an Airbnb?
Yeah.
Anyway, just a note for communication purposes to the community in the future, should this make it into the code.
Yeah, that's really fair because long-term rentals actually are not regulated by the town. It's, it's a landlord tenant, do what you want to do type of issue.
Okay.
Okay, page 7, number 11, that's there, but that's the one I picked up on. But so when I look at this, there's a list of things that the resident has to comply with, and another one is the house number needs to be visible from the street. But when I look at the owners, when they're doing the application, there's a list of items here, and some of these things are repeated and some of them aren't. So I don't know if that's intentional or not. Like, for example, you have the smoke detectors, that's the same. And you have stuff with the doors, but then there's other stuff here, like the house number, I saw that. There's no campers located on short-term property. If the owner has a camper, does that impact that? And does the owner have to testify to that? I don't have a problem per se, but I just want to make sure that we're being consistent between these two sections.
Yeah, I mean, as written, I think if the owner had an RV, they would have to move it off of the property as written, unless we wanted to write something in there that said,
All I'm saying is we may want to just make sure that we go through this and we're okay that these two lists have different items because they
yeah,
seem
so
to be.
where's the other list we're looking at? Which one are you comparing it to? So the
It's
F-
2AI during the application. So,
Oh, yeah, so probably C2 and F3.
yeah. Actually, that's 2A, yeah, 2AI under C, yeah.
Yeah, we can double check. C2AI is specific to an affidavit,
Mm-hmm,
and then F is the overall requirements kind of for enforcement.
okay,
So C is saying you have to sign to us notarized that you are abiding by these rules. And then F is the rules. And there are more that are being signed on.
yeah, I'm just wondering if there's,
If it should
obviously, yeah, some of them aren't applicable, but some, like number 4 in particular, seem like that was a structural thing that you had to
Yeah, I mean,
demonstrate.
theoretically, you could do almost the same thing you just, you did with that other thing you noticed is you could say the owner must sign an affidavit to the requirements of sections F3 rather than.
Yeah, I
Nothing to
mean,
others.
the wedding, obviously, the owner can't attest to that. That's a rule they have to follow, but there's some other, like, there seem to be some building specific. And I didn't go through it in a fine tooth.
Yeah.
But-
Well, I can double check that.
Okay.
C2AI with F3.
So the next item I had was under the unhosted rental. And that is permitted in RP and CN zones. The question I had with that is if you're in a CN zone, and let's say you're a store owner, and you want to rent the apartment spaces above your house short-term,
Mhm.
are we impacting affordability in Niskayuna? Because what's going to happen is it's going to be better for the storefront owner not to rent the apartments above to residents, but rather rent them short-term. And will that reduce options within the town for people to live in?
It's a fair question. There were less I still have to add the rental units into my calculations for single-family homes.
I just don't want to
Yeah, neighborhood.
unintentionally,
Yeah, so I mean, like the
Impact.
place where that occurs most is obviously the Niskuna Co-op Plaza Square
Yeah.
area. There is in the CN zone.
RP, I don't
What
know,
about head to tail?
So the idea for these two zones is that they are a mixture of residential and commercial, so that a unhosted short-term rental would not have as much negative impact because it's in a walkable area to shops. It's in a place where, maybe you are trying to attract additional people to come and buy things like Upper Union and the town center overlay. But I mean, it is a fair question. I think anywhere that you allow unhosted short-term rentals does create a risk of driving up affordability costs of the housing.
I just wanted to acknowledge that to make sure we were aware of that. Then the other question I had to do with was RP residential areas. So can the scenario happen that if I have a office in an RP zone and I can't rent all the office space in my building, is it possible for me to convert those offices and meet the zoning requirements for a residential use within this
As a short-term
context?
rental.
And we are unintentionally getting like quasi hotels in RP because somebody's putting in like,
So I mean, it would require likely a special use permit or a use variance because you can have a single family home in the RP zone,
Yep.
but you can't have an apartment building. So
Well,
if
one
you
could
were to
argue,
if you were to take an existing office building in the RP zone and you would want to convert it to residential units so that you can rent them as short-term rentals, you would still have to go through a site plan approval process. And
even if someone wanted to do one or two and keep most of the building commercial.
yeah, you would have to. This does not supersede. It doesn't supersede the uses that are allowed on a property.
Okay.
So, RP doesn't allow multifamily units. I know that specifically because the Ritmo building on Balltown Road where the old,
Yep.
yeah, that's an RP zone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
like the scenario I
Yeah,
was thinking.
but they had to get a use variance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm good with that. That was really the extent of the comments. I think the rest is fine.
So we were trying to target neighborhoods that were distinct and not duplicative throughout the town.
Mhm.
With the unhosted, like there's very few homes in a CN zoning district, and if one were to go in,
Yeah,
it would be like in a commercial district. But Clark did find some additional homes in the RP zoning district, which I did not initially identify, which include the Schwaber Drive. They're not distinguishable enough from other homes that like either we should consider rezoning that neighborhood or we should reconsider having RP on here because I don't think they're that different.
so that is actually right as you enter Schreiber Drive, that there's like a buffer where it's RP.
The whole thing is RP.
It is.
Yes, which I did not realize until we ran some numbers a couple days ago. Yesterday.
That's kind of interesting because I remember a lot of discussion when that went in, and I guess I don't remember that was RP. I knew like right along Balltown Road. There's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
buffer.
that's what I'm saying. You can build a single family home in an RP zone. It's allowable. You can't have a multifamily.
So how is the town going to handle that?
I don't know. I just identified that issue today.
Okay.
My thought is you either recommend a rezone of that neighborhood or you remove RP from the unhosted allowable zoning districts for now until you figure it out. It's not great to only have one zone, but
Well, I think that's a legitimate concern. It depends on what I know that the town was looking to get this implemented shortly.
because what it would essentially do is take one neighborhood, the Schwaber Drive Loop, and make that the only place that you could own a regular single-family home and buy it
Yeah, but I
prospectively
don't
as an
see,
unhosted rental.
I don't see how that's a viable option, Laura, because people bought those houses with the expectation that it's going to be a residential neighborhood.
No, that's what I mean. That's why I
Yeah.
think it's, I didn't realize that Schwaber was RP.
Yep.
And I think that there shouldn't be any additional burden on that neighborhood because of their particular zoning, so.
Yeah, and I actually have concerns that if we say we're going to zone it later, it might not happen.
Yeah, yeah, so your recommendation would be to take the RP zone
would-
out of there for now?
We can always put it in once we resolve the
Mhm.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments that anybody else has?
No,
Okay. What's the committee's pleasure on this? Do we want to give this a conditional declaration or a negative deck based on the comments being addressed? Or do we want to wait on this to get these addressed?
You can wait if you want to, or you can take action
Yeah.
today. There isn't a time deadline on this meeting.
I'm okay with so I'm just speaking for myself. I don't, but I'm okay with conditional, but if you want to wait, I'll do what the board, what most everyone else wants to do.
The other just piece of data for you guys is the planning board is having a public hearing on it on August 26th.
Yeah.
So,
And-
so you could wait, and then if there are substantial comments and changes, that could be incorporated before you do your recommendation to the town board on the final seeker.
Okay, Georgia, do you have any comments in the next action that you want to do on this? So I guess we can wait if we want to, or we can take action. Chuck?
I think that, I'm sorry, I think that waiting until after the public comments are in and the redraft is done is the best approach, because then you will incorporate the feedback from more individuals living in the area. And then it will be closer to a final version that we can review and address. So I would say wait until at least after the public comment.
Thanks. Ashok? Chuck, do you have?
Hi, this is Ashok. I concur with Georgia, and I've been attending a few town board meetings, and people not infrequently take the privilege of the floor to address this issue. So I have a feeling the public hearing will be attended by folks with feedback. I'm inclined to hear what they say.
Yeah, and just so you guys understand, the planning board is not the lead agency for seeker on this, so they can hold their public hearing as part of their recommendation to the town board.
The town board is
But
the
the
lead.
town board has to have the seeker determination from you before they can call their public hearing. So there are two public hearings required. The first one is for a recommendation only, and that one can occur prior to kind of the code as developed by the planning board and recommended potentially by this board for environmental impacts. Would go to the town board in, like, based on this timeline, September-ish. They need the seeker determination, probably your September meeting, so that they can review the code that's recommended by the planning board and had an initial public hearing, plus your environmental review and comments, and then create their own code to call for the public hearing. Lots of steps on a zoning code amendment.
Okay, Chuck, do you have a,
Yeah, I agree with Georgia and Ashok that we let the public have their say and then assess that feedback and review take a look at it again in our next meeting.
okay, it sounds to me like we should table this.
So, I mean, most of this seems like the nuts and bolts, but there's nothing in here that is like for, making sure that, water is conserved other than, and I mean, there's a thing for garbage pickup, but there's nothing that says, that, recycling, there's no composting, there's no, there's nothing in here that, some of the wear and tear that comes from people using your property, as weekend warriors, that is, is put in here. This is all nuts and bolts of, mostly it looks like fire safety and, and also for, crowd control.
That's partly because it's kind of based in the building code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is something in here that says that, that you're not allowed to have fireworks in Schenectady County and in Niskayuna, but I was under the impression that you are allowed to have fireworks in Schenectady County.
Mm-mm.
Not anymore? They took
No.
it back?
They turned it back, I think, either 1 or 2 years after it was allowed. They had a lot of injuries,
Okay.
and Schenectady County actually banned it before Albany County rebanned it.
Okay.
So if
There's an enormous amount. So if that's the case, then in Niskayuna, that we really need to do a much better job with trying to find this, because there is so much fireworks that I thought they were still legal.
no, they're not.
I mean, I thought,
Nope.
So that's good to know.
Well, it's confusing because New York State allows them, and counties can opt in or opt out.
okay, so
Both Schenectady
County
and
opted,
Albany originally opted in.
and then they,
Schenectady opted out within a year or two because they had so many injuries, and then
Okay.
Albany actually recently opted out. I believe it's still legal in Saratoga County.
Is that the county?
Huh?
The county opted out.
The county opted
Yeah.
out. Yeah, and the reason I know is because when the county's in, we get applications during fireworks season to put up temporary tents in our commercial zoning districts. They were only allowed to do that for 2 years. The county opted out. That's why you don't see any fireworks selling tents at Mohawk Commons. Yeah, because they opted out. Yeah, I mean, otherwise I may not even know. I just happen to know because we permit the fireworks tents. And on the 3rd year of it being legal in New York State, Schenectady County opted out, and they were no longer allowed to have firework tents in the town of Niskayuna.
okay, then I think that around the week, all right, well, prior to the 4th of July and the week after that, we need to do a better job patrolling our streets, because, I mean, there were a couple that like shook my house. And I was like, holy mackerel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's like overwhelming for them on those nights, but you're always welcome to call the police. I do think they would come if you said there's fireworks shaking my house. I do think they would come.
Yeah.
It might take them a while because they might get a lot of those calls, but they'll definitely still come.
Okay, all right, so I guess, so then I'm just gonna go back to, we'll revisit this, in September.
Feel free to share with your neighbors and people too. Get as much comments as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, discussion items. We have 2 discussion items, and in some ways they're similar. In some ways, I'd say they're similar, but they're in different context.
Yeah.
So let's handle the first one, 929 Pierce Road. And the applicant would like to subdivide a parcel and put a second house on that parcel. And one of the challenges with this development is they want to put a long driveway in and then put the house behind the house. The town has an awful lot of experience with this particular type of development. At one time, it was routinely done. In recent years, I think since 2013, it has been discouraged, but not eliminated completely. There's a whole host of reasons why you don't want to do it. If you look at Pierce Road, Pierce Road, the way it developed was somewhat problematic because when things were subdivided, they tended to be subdivided in long, narrow lots. So there's large parcels there, relatively large parcels, but not a lot of road frontage. And it has implications to neighbors and stuff like that. So what I'd like to do is I'd just like to open the floor and let's just sort of discuss what we think about this.
I did put a table of similar, like flag lots or another name for them too. And, like Chairman says, there have been some of them on Pierce Road. But this is, on average smaller than any that we've ever seen. And it's also not adjacent. And they are discouraged by the comprehensive plan. So
So does it meet the safety requirements for the amount of road that the person to get back to because that is a quite a ways off the road for like a
it'd have to. Yeah. That's a building code issue though when it comes like if the subdivision approval was approved, when they go to build the house, they have to provide specifications and engineering to show the driveway can handle the weight of it's a very heavy fire truck and the driveway has to have clearance both to the side and above. And that's part of the building permit. Not impossible to do. Expensive, but not impossible. So all of the houses that are in the back that end up getting built have to build driveways to those specifications.
and then I guess my other I wasn't sure if I understood it correctly. So on the picture that is mine says page 22 of 41.
Let me see.
So it's the proposed, it's the one with the
2021, yeah, it could be, yeah.
22. It's the one with the driveway.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, I had it.
So when you come into the driveway, this is the proposed house. We have the existing, the proposed, subdivision line, and then that proposed second house has all of that lot to that back area. Is that correct?
Wait, say that again.
So there's sorry, I'm not making myself clear, but the back where it says 20-foot rear setback,
Yeah.
all of this area back here on lot 2, which is 1.19 acres, that is all proposed the house for the back house.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then
It's just that there's they have just the 55-foot entrance.
right, the lot does get wider as it goes to the back.
Okay.
So Laura, I have a question about this.
I think one of the points for Ellen's question is the 55-foot frontage does not meet the zoning requirements for the minimum amount of frontage. Correct, Laura?
Yeah, that's correct.
Laura, I have a question because I see a lot on page 20 that's labeled 929, but that does not look like the same lot
It is.
that we're talking about.
Yeah, that is the same one.
So the lot 2476 is not part of the subdivision.
It is not.
And, okay,
2476 actually accesses, I can probably zoom in so you can see this. 2476 is a Whitehall courthouse. It does not access by that long, thin piece. That's not part of 2476. The reason the address is different is it's a Whitehall court address. See, their driveway comes off
Okay,
of Whitehall
yeah,
Court over
okay.
here. This long piece is not proposed in any way, shape, or form as part of the subdivision. I believe the owner may actually be the 911 Pierce Road owner. There is a portion of the existing house's driveway on this long, thin piece, but not included in the subdivision.
So that's sort of my question. How wide is that parcel? The long skinny
The long,
piece?
skinny piece.
Hmm.
I mean, just eyeballing it, it's probably about 50 feet wide, but I can.
So
for you.
if we combined that parcel with this parcel, then it would be a conforming lot?
I actually think it wouldn't, because the long thin parcel is on the southern side, and where the house sits on the new parcel, I think you'd still only ever, unless you
So you
demolish the
couldn't make
existing
it
house.
up on the other side?
No, they're not additive.
Oh, I see.
I think that's just because the house kind of sits a little
Sits
to
on
the
the- it
south,
sits
but
on the wrong
almost
side.
squarely on the lot. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it wouldn't really matter if the driveway was to the south or to the north. It's still going to not meet code.
And we don't know who owns that piece of property?
Yeah, I'm looking it up for you right now.
Okay.
Almost there. Oh, you know what? That must be an old. It has been combined with the adjacent southerly lot. That's what I thought when I looked at it. Was
Okay.
originally that owner, so that's actually all one parcel to the south now.
So that's part of 9/11.
It's part of 9/11. Yep.
Can you flash the image back up, Laura?
Oh, sure.
Cena?
I'll actually flash it with the updated parcel lines here.
And the applicant actually has a new site plan that proposes to leave the barn. And the driveway's a little curved, so there's a newer site plan.
Yeah, I saw that. Oops. Let me just highlight these.
Okay. I think that barn has to go.
There's I don't, are there pictures in your packet? It does have some kind of, parts of it are really falling down, but the original part of it is kind of like historical. So I just highlighted these two. 929 is the northern and 911 is the southern. And you see there's actually no longer a long thin parcel
Okay.
because it's owned by
Yep.
the 911 person. And then you can see more clearly on this, the Whitehall Court address. It's all over here.
Yep, okay. So I think there's two questions, or at least two questions for the board. One sort of deals with this particular parcel, but the other one deals with a flag lot being put in here. And there are, if you look in the neighborhood, there are a lot of flag lots currently here. But there's also a lot of potential for additional ones. So in 2013, the recommendation was not to allow any more. The question I have for you, Laura, is I believe there was one more that was put in this neighborhood subsequently.
I think there's possibly even been two.
We have voted on,
No.
since I've been on this, we have voted on flag lots.
Yeah,
859 Pierce Road is the Knight. It was a Knight property. That one was recent. 848, 842, 838, and 834. None of them require an area variance. They're not truly considered flag lots.
okay, so they met all the requirements then.
They met all of the requirements.
Okay.
Just the 834 has that large back part because it's all wetland, delineated wetlands. So that just all got attached to a single parcel. But 848, 842, 838, and 834 all have 100 feet of frontage. It's not really considered a flag lot situation.
Okay.
But 859 Pierce Road
Mhm.
was relatively recent and did need a variance.
That was the
A
one.
little bit
that was the one we
bigger.
did.
Yeah, the Knight, spelled Canugit. Their lot A ended up being 1 acre. and lot B ended up being 1 acre basically.
I
So
thought we
the-
put restrictions on that too, that it could never be subdivided
Yeah.
again.
So this one is, the proposed lot 1 is, quite a bit smaller, I think, than lot A by 1/3 of an acre, but kind of a similar size lot B. But still, the total, like, it's about a 1/2 acre different. The Knight lot had a 1/2 acre more to work with.
It's that front that is very, very small. It's that front that,
The frontage on the Knight one was 25 feet. Also, though, they were adjacent to flag lots all around them.
Mhm.
I think that's a good point though, Dar. I was thinking about the same thing, that when did we discourage flag lots in the code? And it seems like that was 2013. And how many have been allowed since then? We tracked the size of the flag lots. It would be nice to add the date in there too, because so many of those flag lots appear to have happened before 2013.
From my recollection, and I could be wrong here, but I actually think that this was the only lot that has gotten through with this type of configuration since 2013.
The
Right.
Knight one.
The Knight, and I
Yeah.
think Ellen, you brought up part of the reasoning was that it was surrounded by or pre-existing flag lots.
So we could add the year. I think, Clerk, it's a really good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That would be really helpful, I think.
And then from this committee's perspective, and our duty and mission here, what is the downside, or what is the reason to, from a Conservation Advisory Council committee point of view, to frown upon flag lots?
I think there's a couple issues that surround them. One is that you're not really building a neighborhood. What you're doing is you're putting houses behind houses, so that's not a really good development approach. The problem too is that flag lots sort of, once you get one in, like if you look at the lot, if you happen to say, well, 888, put a flag lot in, that basically ensures that the other two neighbors lose development rights. Because if somebody were to buy this parcel, they could put a road in there and they could put houses in there that fit the zoning. So there's, I think, a potential economic impact to that. And then there's also the whole thing from a fire and all that sort of stuff as well. That can be somewhat mitigated. Or did you have any other reasonings that?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of direct compare this one, I think, to Palmer Ave. In the Palmer Ave situation, that lot, if you look at some of the old tax maps, it has kind of a dotted line that goes through it because it was a double lot when it was subdivided. There wasn't another house built on it, so it has an extra big yard for Palmer now, but it was built theoretically in the 1910s to have a house there. And the expectation, I think, even though people love and enjoy a large yard, is that there could have been a house there. When we get into flag lots, we're not talking about a lot that was vacant and didn't get built upon during an original subdivision. And we're not honestly talking about a right to subdivide. Yes, there's a big backyard, but there isn't enough frontage on the front because these homes were originally put with a certain frontage and front yard, and there wasn't an expectation that they would be further subdivided. The backyards are tempting to people when they're big to squeeze another house in there because you can then sell it and make money off of selling it. But the slippery road that you go down is, there isn't an outright right to subdivide that parcel. It doesn't meet the zoning. And when you allow people to go into these large backyards and create these new lots, you're reducing the open space that we also have as the Conservation Advisory Council. We're always looking at, people are constantly trying to squeeze in where you can keep subdividing and keep making more money and reducing the open space. And do we at some point want to draw a line and say, that's not enough acres, that's not a big enough backyard, and you're just trying to squeeze in a house there where it doesn't belong and you don't necessarily have as of right to subdivide. There's a difference.
Yeah, there is, and maybe I made a wrong statement when I said they're similar but different. The other problem you have is we're just looking at Pierce right now, but suppose someone had an extra long lot, let's say in Old Niskayuna, and they came in and said, hey, we want to put a house behind that house, and the houses are a lot tighter, and I can put a non-conforming driveway on the left side of the house because my driveway is on the right side of the house. And I think when the comprehensive plan committee looked at this, it was very hard to draw a line and say, where's the end game for this? Because as Laura said, if somebody buys a house and wants to flip it and get the maximum profit out of the house, are we going to end up with a mishmash and lose the streetscape that, is important to a community? So I think that's where it fits in.
And that's great. Thank you for that summary. That's very helpful.
Yeah, I also think when we looked at 859, we were very careful to make that very unique to that particular situation in that parcel in our statement. I think there were a statement made there, and maybe Ellen, if you remember, that it was surrounded by flag lots. It was,
Yeah. Well, I think also the expectation, for 929, you have 939, you have 2488 and 2484 and 2480, quite frankly. All of those homes on Brookshire Drive that will butt up against, that will be, that neighbor will then be, part of that. That is not the expectation when when they bought those homes, was that there was going to be another home
A
behind
development in the backyard.
their
Yeah,
development in their
there
backyard.
isn't an
And it also
expectation.
affects their value. And
Mhm.
I don't think you can just go ahead and say yes to this without, having, you need to let them know. I mean, this, or I don't.
All subdivisions require a public hearing noticed, mailed, so they'll definitely get a notice in the mail. But it's another fair point. Like, you may have an expectation of a double lot or a vacant lot, that there could have been a home there, but you do not have an expectation of somebody's rear yard being developed into a home.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say that, maybe the frontage can lend some guidance, in original planning. And from the conservation perspective, for wildlife and wildlife corridors, these open green spaces behind the homes, they tend to be the last refuge for a lot of mammals and birds and reptiles. And as they're encroached, there's just less and less area available for denning, for nesting, for traversing, for hunting. So that would be the other piece there. The majority of wildlife in suburban areas exist in backyards.
Hi, this is Ashok. I just wanted to second what Georgia said about the importance of backyards to conservation. So often in back-to-back streets, like in Old Niskayuna, the backyard of one street is touching the backyard of another street. I'm not saying this right, but you know what I mean. So it's actually a somewhat big area of green space that is rather precious to insects, birds, and small mammals.
Okay, yeah, so no, that's all very helpful. So in my head, and thanks for the clarity, a backyard is a backyard, not an investment. And when these lots were originally purchased, they were purchased with the intent of a home and a spacious backyard and a purposeful backyard. Not, again, like I said, not real estate investment for future building. So the expectation is it will be used as such and not leveraged, for more building. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so this one is still very preliminary. but we could give some kind of initial CAC thoughts and feedback to the planning board for their review on, it's not actually going to the 12th meeting because the developer can't make it. So on the 26th, we could give them some preliminary thoughts. And then you could start looking at the questions in the part 2 environmental assessment form.
Yep.
Because a couple of things that we always think about, our normal sustainability checklist, the environmental assessment review form, the impact that this one has, small potentially, but if it continues a trend of this type of development, it could be much larger too. So that's one of those things you got to balance when you're reviewing those forms.
So I have two things that it would be helpful, Clark, if you could make a list of subdivisions like this since 2013, because I think that would be helpful to us. The other question I had is, and I have not driven by this house yet. Is this a historic, does this fall under the historic?
I mean, it's definitely older than 50 years, so we could have the Historic Preservation Committee look at it. But as far as we could, just estimating it, well, they could research it, but it didn't look like it had any initial historic value.
Okay.
There was one on Pierce Road, we talked about actually that maybe we wouldn't have known, but it was actually a Schaefer home on Pierce Road.
But this is not like the original farmhouse that was on this property or something like that?
I don't think so. The existing house ends up looking pretty small, actually. The barn has some interesting characteristics to it, but it also has some structural issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it would just, I personally would like to know, and I'll drive by the house, but like when that house was built, if we can.
Okay, we can find when the house was built too, just so you have that data.
Yep. Okay, does anybody else have any more comments on this particular project?
No, I think just, notice that it doesn't meet the requirements. It's not, these are not flag lots here. It's not the expectation of the homeowners that this house would be, there would be a house behind those other houses, that you're taking down, trees and disrupting a backyard for, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll add those plus Chuck and George's comments to the planning board agenda statement.
Okay, let's move on to the next discussion item. And that is 1045 Palmer Avenue. The property lies in an R2 medium density zone. As Laura mentioned, this is an older part of the town, and majority of the houses in this area were built before there were zoning requirements, I believe. Is that true, Laura?
Yeah, these homes in this area are between 1910 and 1925. And I think our very, very first zoning code was sometime in the 40s.
There was a comp plan that was done in 29,
Oh, so maybe 20s.
but that's different than the zoning code. I thought, but anyway, so the existing neighborhood, most of the houses are 40-foot lots. And the applicant would like to do a subdivision on this particular lot. So I'd like to just open the floor for discussion. And again, this is just a discussion item. We don't have to make a decision tonight.
Yeah, it's just an opener. And I just brought up the map that I was referring to. I still get worried when we have very small lots that are being subdivided because they're way below the minimums of today's standards, and we're reducing, existing green space. But in this case, you can see that little red line there was the original subdivision line. Somewhere along the line, the person who bought this house in the 1920s purchased 2 lots and didn't put a house. So it became 1 lot. So you only have the right to it as one lot. And under today's standards, it doesn't meet code. And so you need pretty significant area variances in order to subdivide this lot. But if you go down the street, you can see that there appears to be a space where a house should be, and there isn't one, because these were all subdivided at the same time, and then this got combined into a single lot. Very early on, I can't find any data of it ever being anything more than one lot. So that usually indicates to me that it happened like during construction. The original owners probably purchased the double lot.
Right, and there's also concern about the sewer and the water, that this is, and parking, and, I mean, these are all things that were brought up in the comprehensive plan here, so doesn't
Yeah, so putting like a higher density building on that lot would definitely be discouraged by the comprehensive plan. The lady, when she went to the planning board, was trying to find a way that she could stay in the neighborhood and age in place. You cannot have two single family homes on a single parcel. Like, her ideal situation would be to put some kind of a secondary living unit on this parcel without having to subdivide, but under our code, it's not allowed. So the only thing that you could do in order to build a home that's like a ranch style or something smaller would be to subdivide and put the smaller home on its own parcel. That was her stated intention. And, you know, honorable, we do sometimes have people subdivide though, and then not actually and build the house, you know, because they don't have to. They can go through the subdivision process with the best of intentions of building the house that they want to. And then something may happen and they end up moving to Florida to take care of their daughter or their mother or whatever. And then somebody else comes along and does not build the same house that was represented during the subdivision. We've had that happen multiple times. So
Yep.
Fair story, but just keep in mind that it doesn't have to unfold that way.
Laura, I also think we have to be a little careful saying that putting another house in there is unacceptable from a water or wastewater standpoint. That's a technical question that I think should be addressed by the engineering department, because it may have a negligible impact on water or sewer.
Oh, I agree with you. It's
No,
actually,
I think we have to be careful about making a blanket statement like that.
well, Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she's actually just reading what the comprehensive plan says about that neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's a direct statement out of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, the comp plan did make broad statements about this particular area because there have been both stormwater problems and I think they were primarily stormwater problems. I don't remember the sewer problems, but I do remember the stormwater problems.
But yeah, an individual house connection to this system is probably negligible, but the overall recommendation from the comprehensive plan.
Well, it said adding any more two-family units to the neighborhood because it would result, quote, in an increase in population density and aggravation of existing parking problems along these neighborhood roads, which currently carry significant traffic volumes. It would not be practical to permit new two-family homes. And it is awfully, you know, and they also said the oldest water and sewer distribution systems in the town are in Old Niskayuna, and both existing systems are aging out and undersized. This is also likely true of stormwater systems.
Yeah, okay, so
Okay.
That's all
thank
written
you.
in the comprehensive plan in the, that was sent in here. That's all I was,
So
Yeah.
as I recollect, if that statement was made about the sewer lines and the water mains, that probably came from the engineering department.
But to be clear, that was in reference to a two-family home?
Yeah, I
Is
think
that,
Palmer has a
Yeah.
predominant two-family home composition. So I think the
Okay.
question would be if, you know, the proposal was to put a two-family home on this parcel, which is, you know, the same as probably, well, hers isn't a two-family home, but probably
Right.
on either side of her.
So
Well-
why
well, I
is
guess my
that?
question is that, you know, if you say yes to building something, you know, can you say no to two-family and it has to be this
So two families aren't allowed under the current zoning code.
But you could get a variance.
variance?
You could. That's not part of this proposal. This proposal is
Just for.
just to subdivide.
Yep.
And it would be a use variance for a two-family home. And the level of review for a vacant home, a vacant parcel, is that they would have to prove with dollars and cents proof that they could not make money off of that parcel as a single family home, in addition to some other things, in order to even be considered to be allowed to build a two-family home on there. Very difficult to do with a vacant parcel. Get a use variance for a higher intensity use.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm kind of confused about that. So if the applicant came before the board and said, I want to convert my existing house to a two-family house,
Mhm.
they'd have to go in front of the ZBA.
yes.
But they have to go in front of the ZBA anyway in order to subdivide this parcel.
Yeah, but it would be two separate ZBA actions. They're not tied
Yeah,
together.
no, they're not
Yeah,
tied, but
right.
are you saying to subdivide this lot is a less onerous
Yes.
process?
Subdividing this lot is only an area variance.
But when you build a house on this, do you have to now go before the ZBA because you're not meeting the requirements? Or do they waive all the requirements?
No, you would have to go to the ZBA then to build a house, because under the setbacks of today's standards, which both lots then are required to be reviewed under today's standards once they're subdivided. So inherent in this subdivision, there's an area variance for the frontage of the lots, and there also has to be an immediate area variance for the existing home, because it is now sitting on a new lot that's required to meet the setbacks of our code of the time. So it's no longer grandfathered in. So the existing house and the frontages have to be reviewed by the zoning board under this proposal. A new house, under this proposal, the lot is 40 feet wide, the setbacks are 15 feet. So a new house could only be 10 feet wide. That's not going to work. So yeah, a new house, when it gets designed and developed, would have to go to the zoning board once it figures out its footprint too.
And I
So-
think what Laura was saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, the use variance would come into account if someone was proposing to build a two-family house,
Yeah, and the use variance here would be really tough.
because that's not allowed in the current zoning district.
Okay.
Exactly.
So let me go to the next scenario here. So if I were going to go and I have my area variance and I'm going to build a house, would that drive the house to be shaped in such a way that it would not fit into the neighborhood? So like you said, would somebody conceivably come in with a 10-foot house, but maybe a 15-foot house? Or see what I'm saying? Because the more you ask for the variance, the harder it's potentially
Yeah,
to
it's
be.
true.
So are you going to
But
drive the new house in there?
The new house is still going to be an area variance, and the area variance is still a balance of, can you reduce the variance requested, but is it in harmony with the neighborhood and stuff like that? And when we're seeing new houses and we're seeing significant area variances, we are trying to refer them to the architectural review board. So hopefully that'd be a conversation, not mandatory. They could put a 10-foot wide house in there. Our code would just say,
Well,
go for it. But I mean, most people wouldn't.
I think there's an example though, in Old Niskayuna, or some examples where new houses have gone in and they're completely inconsistent with the surrounding houses. Like all you see is the garage.
You have one right on, that not.
Yeah,
That, on
Yeah.
Knott Street.
Right. But yeah, those are all excellent points, but I'm wondering if at this point, this person's only asking for a subdivision.
Correct.
And so for us to imagineer what could be done on the land doesn't negate the value of the ask here to subdivide. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Hilltop and Van Antwerp, we lived through, this couple years ago, where a nice piece of wooded land turned into 5 houses pretty quickly. I'm just wondering, but I don't know if, again, from this committee's point of view, all this person's asking to do is say, I want what we believe or what has been presented to be the original intent of the land, which was to be 2 plots. And they want that to happen. And if somebody wants to come in with a micro house or a mini house or a small house or whatever they're called and make it work, that's not for this committee to decide. Correct?
Correct. That would go to the zoning board. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah, but
Or maybe even not.
it gets down to, this sets in motion some subsequent actions that you know are likely to occur. So I think I would disagree on that, because you can't take a project and segment it. And in some ways, my view on this is it could be segmented, right? I mean, the person wants to build a house, and whether the committee decides whether that's the best thing to do or not is up for debate. But I also think the type of house that goes in there, the town has a goal to protect the architectural integrity of the neighborhood. So
I
there
agree
could be
completely.
subsequent conditions that were recommendations I think the committee would have to make if they made this particular action have no environmental impact. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're going through the EAF, it's a short form on this one, I believe. When you're going through the EAF and you're parsing that out, and there's a question about the character of the neighborhood, I mean, a suggestion could, I think, very reasonably be made that there be a condition in the subdivision approval that any house be has to be reviewed by the architectural review board for a reasonable approximation to the surrounding houses or something like
yeah,
that.
I mean, I think I think it would be in our best interest or the town's best interest to provide a reasoning or guidance to the ZBA when the applicant came back to build the house, right?
Agreed.
So it's not done in a vacuum.
Yes.
And it seems kind of weird too, because you get the subdivision, but then you could get denied the whole,
Well,
the ability to build a house. Let's say the ZBA came back and said you can't build a house, right?
But-
So then what happens to this property? It's subdivided. So how does the town handle that?
yeah. So, I mean, I think the zoning board would have to consider that even when it's doing its subdivision review, that it'll understand that when a house comes, it'll require an additional zoning board review. But there is, I think, almost some comfort in that, because you couldn't theoretically buy this and then, like, on the opposite of a tiny house, like try and fit a McMansion in there, 3 stories tall with, no pitched roof or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't immediately meet the zoning board can look at that and say, that's too big an ask.
Mm-hmm.
That house does not fit on that parcel. Go back and figure something out that's better. So it's not terrible that the zoning board has to relook at it either. The only thing you could fit on there without a zoning board is a tiny house.
Yeah.
You could do a tiny house.
Well, and I guess what I'm thinking is, this person has come to the town with this request, and I don't know if it's, our duty to share with them, the reality of the situation that, should even this request get approved, what they're left with is, like you said, such a limited space. And if they're okay with that, then I guess they could go through with that, with that subdivision. Just to give you some perspective, and I know it doesn't apply to Niskayuna, New York, but where we lived in Vermont, across the street from us was a piece of property that had been subdivided, and when the town approved it, but what happened was the person couldn't build on it because of the codes, so the town said, sure, go ahead, you could do that, but the person who owned it or who had that action was left with a piece of land that they could do nothing with, and it just stayed that way. So I don't know what kind of how objective we have to be on this, but if they're just asking, I just want to take this property that was envisioned to be a separate piece of land anyway, and then let the next step, let them go through that process and roll the dice. We would have to have a leap of faith that Niskayuna zoning would allow if anything to be built there would be appropriate in the spirit of the neighborhood and compliant with all current laws, rules, and regulations.
As much.
I guess that would just be the owners, that would be the buyer, the owner beware at that point.
Yeah, I mean, because it's very tight, right? All of the homes in Palmer there are very tight. The driveways are probably a foot off the property lines. The houses are 5 feet off of the property lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna build, yeah. So I mean, you're talking about substantial area variances, even to just get a house that fits in with the neighborhood. And we can definitely make sure that she understands that, because people who don't do a lot of subdivisions, there's a lot of steps. This one also, if it were to go through zoning and planning, it still actually has to go to the city of Schenectady for the rear, and the city of Schenectady requires its own subdivision.
Right.
Wow, that
She's
just
got-
seems like a lot of work.
There's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of work. Yeah.
And it's almost like we want to tell them, do us, an administrative favor and withdraw your application, but it doesn't deny them the right to apply
Yeah.
or to go through a fair process for what they're asking for.
But
Yeah,
the,
no, I agree.
but the zoning board will understand, I think, because in addition to the frontage, they do have to look at the existing home. It's impossible not to realize that when you create this lot, it's going to need an area variance for if a home is ever built on it.
Yeah, I guess the reason why I was pulling the string on that was it seems odd that you have to come back and it can't be like done all at once.
Yeah, well, it couldn't be, because if you were to get an area variance for the footprint of the house on the adjacent lot, you have to pull a building permit within 90 days.
Oh, okay.
So unless they wanted to go through and spend the money to actually design a house on the property, with the hope that you get the subdivision, that's a pretty penny to spend, not knowing whether or not you're going to get substantial area
Yeah.
variances. So that's why that's actually divided out, I think, because most people aren't going to design the house until they know that they have the land.
So we don't have to take action tonight. I just wanted to make sure that we had a discussion on this. And
So I'll make a note to the planning board on the concern for the house fitting in with the neighborhood
yeah,
and
Yep.
the long process and the multiple steps that would have to come.
yeah, I'm actually concerned that the homeowner doesn't realize the process.
Well,
That's my concern too.
it's true. This is not a developer that's asking. It's the owner of the single family home there. She has been meeting with Schenectady County, who has been trying to help her. And she's met with Clark a couple times.
Okay.
He's amazing at helping people through the process. But it is a really big process. So constantly reaffirming the next steps is probably a really good idea.
Well, and also I would just like to say, and I know we got a little bit of the backstory on this application, and that backstory is I want to live next to the house that maybe my kids will move into to help take care of me. And I think this is, if that hasn't already been a scenario coming to town hall, I believe that will be a scenario that's going to come more and more and more. So I'm really curious to see, kind of the town deal with these kind of requests in a fair and obvious way.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good scenario. It's a good thing for us to get a precedent on.
Yeah, I think that's a really great observation, because she said this at the planning board meeting. Like, she would much rather just put a second unit on the house, on that parcel, have her kids move into the big house and live on a secondary unit. It's not allowed under our zone. That's the first thing she tried. And there's a lot of people who don't own a double lot but still need that situation. So an overarching thing that I think we need to look at on a different zoning code amendment would be how to help people age in place, and do we
Yes.
want to
Mhm.
change the way that we're handling our accessory dwelling units, because that also helps with affordability of housing. If you can have,
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons that accessory dwelling units, the way that you regulate them and guide them is changing to try and help people
This house
multi-generationally.
it couldn't be fitted for an in-law suite.
I mean, it probably could, but I think, these houses are hard. There's already 3 steps automatically to go up to the first floor. They're just, even if you were to modify them, they're, you know, you got to modify them with the big ramps and everything on the front of the houses, which you can do, but they do.
Yeah.
Well, also too, I think older houses tend to be, will have a lot of compartments, narrow doors. I
Yeah.
mean, I can see where it'd be hard to age in place in an older house, so. Okay, why don't we move on to the community smart, or the climate smart community task force items? So Laura, do you have an update on the greenhouse gas emissions inventory?
So we took the comments and review from you guys, also brought it to the comprehensive plan and got some good comments, and did submit it to DEC for their review. It ended up being that with the government climate action plan and a couple other things that we'd worked on recently, that we were able to accumulate enough points to submit for a bronze. So even though we're still working on the community climate action plan and our government, the community greenhouse gas emission and our government action plan, we may be eligible for the bronze award, and then we can just keep working on the other stuff, which would be really cool.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, we've been working away. I mean, a lot of the things that helped with the submittal of the government greenhouse gas inventory were things that this board has done. So you guys are the ones that are plowing through these things and getting the points. I just submit the. But yeah, so that was exciting. I did talk to Jim about our community greenhouse gas inventory, and he wants to get a little more information on what some of the really big players are doing in our community. Like GE, we don't think we can probably get a lot of information from Capel, but we might try.
Well, we do have those, we do get those annual reports.
Yeah, so we can
So,
look at those.
yeah, I would look at those.
Yeah, and then some of that information is kind of blacked out for sensitivity reasons, which is making the community greenhouse gas inventory a little bit more difficult. But what we're going to do is reach out to a couple people that we know and see if we can just get very aggregated data that should not be sensitive to the organizations, to just see if we can get a better idea of use on that sector. It doesn't even have to be broken down to specific organizations. It can be lumped together in an research and industrial sector of the town. It's just hard to get that data. And we have a feeling that it's probably a big chunk of data, just because of the number of people that work there.
Natural resource inventory. I know we have an upcoming walkthrough with Jim. Ashok, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
Please forgive the terrible lighting in my rooms. I mean, it's really horrible. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off the video. So yeah, we have our next nature walk with Jim scheduled for August 17th. So this coming Saturday is August the 10th, and the Saturday after that is the August 17th. So, it's business as usual, 3 sites. The flyer has gone out, and I should do a little bit more outreach, and I have time set aside on Thursday and Friday for Facebook posts and things like that.
Good, thank you. Okay, moving on, the land preservation tools. We had a good discussion during the comprehensive plan meeting where we talked about all the different tools that we could potentially do. And I think we agreed on putting together a toolbox of those tools. And Ashok volunteered me to take it on. I have started it, but I haven't finished it yet. So that happened earlier, or about a couple weeks ago. So we're progressing on that. Some of the discussions we had involved a community fund, how to fund the community fund, the tax abatement that we have been talking about based on the Bethlehem was discussed, and that's sort of in the mix as well. So we also talked about how we could present the proposals to the town of Niskayuna in general and what the best approach is, what communities do to do this. And depending on how you implement these tools, either it's a town board action or it requires a vote, depending on the level of what you want to set up. Some of them actually entail pulling in the state legislature as well. So more to come on that. Okay, pesticide outreach. Ellen?
Nothing, not a whole lot there. I'm hoping to get to a farmer's market. I do have, we are working on a house project. So that requires us to work on our house on the weekends. So that is why I haven't been, usually I go to 2 or 3 farmers markets and do that kind of stuff. So, but moving along on that. So I will say I'll also jump into the Lomo. So I went over to our Lomo area and where we had planted the wildflowers for this year. And I had sent those pictures to Laura. And so, so we are planning on doing some more plantings. So that will be good. That'll be, now I think we'll figure out where we're going to put them, but it would also be nice to have things that, bloom at different times. So we have 2 right now that one bloomed early and one is in full bloom now. So that's nice. So, so that's moving along.
Do you recommend that we put that on the website?
The what?
The pictures of the Lomo area?
So we definitely need to, I would like to see our signs moved out a little bit farther so that you can see them. And then also, maybe taken in each season or something because they're getting, but that's the one, that one is the one that's in full bloom that we just planted this year. But the one in front of it also bloomed and so they look pretty. Those have finished. And then I did like a couple, I'm not the best picture taker apparently, but
Well, it's not showing up on my computer very well.
so that's the whole, that's the whole swath of what we planted this year, and that's what's in bloom right now. But the one section before it had bloomed earlier in the summer. And so, yeah, and then I also did basically along the fence where some of the stuff that we had taken from Kelt's farm, and to see what survived there. So, and then we also are going to get some more compost put down, so that'll work out. That was nice of him.
I mean, I think these pictures look really nice. I mean, it looks like a natural field.
Yeah. Can I just say wow for the wildflower seeds, because Ellen and I planted them on a day before it got 90 degrees for a month, and somehow they still grew and bloomed. I was really worried they were gonna bake and not grow at all. I was so glad when you sent me these pictures because those guys are troopers. We planted them in June.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
So yeah. So anyways, yeah. So and those are the ones along the fence. We haven't done anything along the fence. Mostly we're just trying to do the corridor that between where you walk for now.
Well, we transplanted along the fence. These were beautiful irises.
Those.
Yeah.
The irises.
That was
irises survived. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was hard too.
But anyways, yeah. And then so we'll do some more plantings. Hopefully. Nick reached out to put some more compost down, so we'll work with him again and get some of that down, hopefully before the end of the year for next year. And then I guess I'll just talk about the composting initiative. So it's open over at the senior center, and I spoke with our PR firm and about putting out some information, and I spoke to them and they were working on that. So hopefully that will go out soon.
I spoke to them too.
And then Kayla, I said she got back to me, and so we're going to do a composting class sort of impromptu thing out at a farmer's market.
Oh,
So
cool.
we're going to do that in September. So, yeah, so that's, and hopefully we can open up another. My next step in composting is to talk to all the apartment complexes. So I have them all and I've emailed them all, but what I kind of need to, I would like somebody else besides myself to have like a meeting with them and to talk about those things. But, and 360 Compost said that they would also be helpful in that.
That's a curbside pickup one? the
Yeah.
360?
So what makes it better is that if you are an apartment complex, you can get smaller, if you compost within your community, you can then get smaller garbage. And so that makes it a little bit better, more affordable. Because you're composting and whereas people at home, you can't get smaller garbage bins if you compost, which is something that we need to address in Niskayuna.
I guess it depends on what your initial size of the garbage bin is, right?
Yeah, but even so, yes,
You
I
can't-
I think I don't know. I bring my stuff to the transfer station, so I'm not exactly sure when I was talking to 360 Composting Initiative, she said it's very difficult when you have someone come and pick up your garbage to try to get the smaller bins or something and the variances. But I don't know. I haven't
Yeah.
looked into it really, so I shouldn't say because I don't know.
Because you do reduce it, because we compost and we've composted for 2.5 years now, and we noticed there's a big difference. We used to fill the bin all the way up, and now there's like 2 or 3 bags, if that, in there.
Yeah.
The challenge that I think we had is we looked into getting a smaller garbage cart, which the company does have, but then what they'll do is they'll reduce the recycling to match that size. So
Which is terrible because I feel
that won't work. That won't work for us because for some reason we have a ton of recycling
Well,
as well. So
but I believe, so this is part of the problem is that, right? So we as a community, we as a society have gone to single stream composting, recycling. And we believe that we're doing a good job.
yeah,
And so we believe that what we're recycling is being recycled when in actuality it is not being recycled. So that's where the fallacy is. So, I mean, it's not until you call the person and you say, absolutely not, leave me with my large recycling and my garbage and keep it the same. And I'm composting and, and put your foot down, and demand that you'll see it.
yeah.
But or just bring your stuff to the transfer station where you can do it all and it's less expensive
Mhm.
and it's convenient. That's my public service announcement for the transfer station.
Excellent. Thank you.
And the people that work there are lovely.
they are. I like them a
How
lot.
does the transfer station work?
You bring your garbage, you weigh it, and then you pay for it by the weight, and then you put all your recycling in.
Yeah, it's not single stream recycling. So you put your paper in the paper bin and you put your
Glass, you separate
Yeah,
it out.
glass.
Glass, just like you're supposed to.
I understand. I heard that like you need a permit of some sort before you can even approach the transfer station.
Yes, that is true.
How do you
Yeah.
get that permit?
You can come to the town hall. I don't know if they can. Can
No,
you get
you
it there
can
now?
you can actually go to the transfer station and just talk to them. I believe they can process everything there now because they have a remote.
Right.
Credit
Yes,
card
we
reader.
do.
We should fact check that because I thought I had to go into town hall to get the annual permit,
Oh, you
but
did.
you could buy the cards.
Yes.
So there's 2 layers of payments, and I think the transfer station is a great thing. But just to be clear, there's 2 layers of payments. There's an annual permit, and then there's paying for trash on
Right.
on separate punch cards, and you can buy those punch cards there. And Laura and team, maybe I went to went there and they were out of permits, so I had to go to town hall. Could have been just an administrative.
Oh, maybe you
challenge,
can
but-
only get the permits at town hall
Yeah, I
too. I'm
think
not
so.
sure about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a great resource that we have here. And I highly encourage all those.
Town hall handles those permits. Does anyone know?
Town clerk.
Town
Town.
clerk. Okay.
Town clerk.
Okay, Dart had to step out for a second, so I'll just, Quiet Niskayuna has been going really well. The town board approved the $10,000 order for electric landscaping equipment for our highway and parks department, and they gave us their initial order, and we were able to, kind of get a different quote and get more. So we're just finalizing what pieces of equipment that we're getting with them, but I think it's actually going to be kind of cool because the state likes, or Climate Smart likes it when you do this. So the Climate Smart, we got $10,000 for
Lawn, is that what you're saying?
no, yeah, I know. Why did we get that
Oh, where'd you
rebate
get
grant
the
though?
10,000 from?
I think it was because we achieved enough points on our clean energy communities. I think it was a combination of adopting the stretch code and a couple other things, and we reached a threshold. But when you do that, you can use the money to do more items, which keep giving you more points so you can get more rebates. So this isn't like a huge amount of points, but we put the order together so that we can get another 200 points because we're buying enough landscaping equipment to offset more than 5 megatons of greenhouse gas emissions per year or something like that. That's the threshold. And so we can get the grant and then submit the 200 points and get more points for
Okay.
buying the landscaping equipment.
Oh, for the love of God.
So I'm very happy about that.
Here. God bless you, because it's just like a loop-de-loop.
Well, initially the order they submitted didn't get us there. Like we needed to offset 5, whatever it is, metric tons of carbon or whatever, and we were at like 4.96 or something.
Yeah.
So that's why Trish and I redid the order, and like we're very good shoppers. We actually got it up to like 10 megatons. But
Excellent.
now I have to resubmit it back to the highway department because they did change some of the things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I went over for the Quiet Niskayuna. I went to the EV fair, and I brought the Tesla, and I took some, kids and their mom out for a ride, and another Pearson out, and we went up, and they got to, not the children, but the mother. I had her drive it a little bit in the up there in the parking lot of the school, and somebody else, because they were looking into getting an EV. So I thought that was really great.
Yeah, I was there standing next to Ellen when she offered the ride, and you should have seen the faces of the 2 little boys. You
made their
definitely
day?
made some days. They were very excited. I actually need to add that as an item because we did launch the EV campaign. That should be a separate item on here, so I'll try and remember to put that on the next
Okay.
list.
And now if somebody in Niskayuna purchases an EV, we get credit now.
Yes, so we would get credit, and we'll hopefully build that up, and then that gets us points and a rebate as well.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then if that goes really well, the next campaign that we might be able to do, if somebody wants to help me with this, is the heat pumps.
Okay.
I am not an expert on them,
Yeah.
but we can run a heat pump campaign the same way we're doing the EV campaign. I don't want to do them at the same time though. But if the EV campaign works, then the next one we could look at would be heat pumps.
Okay.
Yep.
I think by that time they'll be ready for them. We'll be ready as a community. So.
Okay, Georgia, did you want to talk about the wildlife corridors?
Yes, sure. With, I think last meeting, you guys discussed the foxes that are in Niskayuna and increasing. And just looking at ring feeds and pictures from my neighbors, we have a fair amount of small mammals, rabbits, foxes, and birds from young eagles to a variety of other birds, songbirds. And I thought that it could be useful to distribute flyers. I have found a couple of flyers from the National Wildlife Rehabilitators Association, and it's a flow chart of how people should interact with wildlife when they come across it. So, side story, I have to call Dan the gutter man because a baby bird fell down my downspout, not on the outside of my downspout, but the inside of my downspout. And I picked it up and it dashed off into my neighbor's bushes. And in that instance, was it featherless? Did it have feathers? This is the flow chart, and it walks everyone through, do you leave it? Do you put it back in the nest? How do you put it back in the nest in a way that it won't be rejected by the mother? Or do you call wildlife rehab? I just thought it could be useful to distribute these flyers and also perhaps additional resources on who people should call. Is the fox healthy? Is the fox sick?
That's
What do
a
you
great
guys
idea.
think?
Yeah, that's a
That's
great
a
idea.
great idea, Georgia.
Yeah, I think we should put it on the website. So
Mhm.
where
We
are
could-
we?
yeah,
Where are
could
we
put
with
it-
the wildlife corridor portion of the website?
Mhm.
We need to work on that. But Georgia, you can send me what you found. We could print some of them out for people, but it's also good for me because I get the Fox questions sometimes. I honestly don't know who they should call. Not the building department.
Right, and not you. So I'll send you the flyers, and then I can also send you. There's a licensing system for wildlife rehabilitators and removers, administered by the DEC for New York State, and they keep a master list of everyone that's licensed, and then there are regional officers also. I'll send all of that to you, Laura.
Yeah.
And if you want me to do more legwork, just let me know. But then you can decide, which of those resources you'd like to inform people about.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Georgia.
Sure thing. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the sustainability checklist, and I see that we've actually made a lot of progress on that, and I think it looks really good. I was going to put it in my heat pump, and then I realized that I am not in the format that you guys are. I think I'm a little too in the weeds.
Oh.
But I would like to, since you brought up the heat pump, I'd like to share some fun
Oh,
facts
okay, yeah.
on that. But let's talk about this first, and then we can close out.
So I'm really liking it. Simran did all of my things for me.
Okay.
I love having it.
Yeah, I thought it looked great.
Well, I think just if you submit it to her, she can put it into.
Okay.
Yeah, Simran also can do that for you too. Yes.
Well, then, okay, if you're going
Yeah.
to do that for me, then
Yeah,
I'll
just
send
send
it
it to Simran. What I think though, and this is just my opinion, is I think each initiative should have its own page.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them might need a little more. Some of it could still use a little more formatting, but I think each initiative should have its own page, and then the cover sheet should be an actual checklist where you check the boxes. So you fill out the checklist, and then behind it is each page of the initiative and why and how it can help and how it can be cost effective for your project.
Okay.
But I feel like I'd say it's at least 75% there, my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them we could add, it's general and it doesn't cite anything, which I think is okay. But some of them I think we could probably add a little bit more to.
Yeah.
Like, Ashok, you had to protect the existing trees, and I just really wanted a picture of like Morrow or one of the places in Old Niskayuna that has the silver maples coming as the tree tunnel, but I couldn't find anything in my own picture, so that's just a Google Earth. Like if you could just walk outside your house and take a picture of your street, then we could put a much nicer picture in there.
That's fair, Laura. Like, by tomorrow, I'll send you a There are a couple of nice pictures from Minot Street, Morrow, Baker. They all have beautiful tree canopies.
Yeah,
I have pictures from Baker I can send you. Some are in the winter, some are in the, most of mine may be from the winter, but I may have some from the summer and spring as well. Would you?
yeah, send them
Okay.
over. And if you guys don't mind, some of them could go in the sustainability checklist, but I also need some pictures for our street tree master plan. So if you guys are okay, I might use them in both places.
I'm okay with that.
Trying to get free pictures. Okay.
Okay.
Good. Okay, so I just like to, I put together something on the heat pumps. I'd just like to sort of share a couple comments. So some stats, 40% of the global emissions that we put out result from heating homes and businesses. So I thought that was a pretty substantial block there. And, you know, heat pumps really provide an opportunity to reduce your carbon footprint because unlike furnaces and boilers that burn fossil fuels, the heat pump actually doesn't generate heat. What it does is it transfers it from a cold area to a warm area. So you're actually taking heat from outside your house to outside the house and using it to heat your house in the winter. And then in the summer, you're actually taking the heat out of your house and dumping it to the outside area. And one of the big questions that people ask about heat pumps is it efficient in cold climates? And at one time, they weren't that efficient in cold climates, but there's been a lot of improvements in the heat pump industry, and they are now really applicable for a climate like Albany. So they generally measure efficiencies by the coefficient of performance, which is basically the amount of heat moved divided by the amount of electricity you put in. So if it's 1, you get what you get out. You get the heat transferred of what you put in. But generally, heat pumps are much higher than that. So there was a study that I found for an average typical home in Albany during a typical heating season, which when I looked at the numbers, they weren't quite typical anymore. We're much warmer. But over the entire winter, it's 2.5, which means for the amount of energy that you put in, you actually get 2.5 times more heat put into your house. So it is really quite efficient. In the summer, it's much higher because the temperature difference is much, much less. They can be between 3 and 5. So they're much more efficient. There is a way around it, and that is to use the earth through geothermal for the sink that you dump and draw the heat from, and the efficiency goes up quite a bit, but they are more expensive to put in. One really interesting application, which I did not think of that was out there, was you can use a heat pump to heat your swimming pool instead of natural gas. And for New York State, you could save for a 1,000 square foot pool around $300 to $500 annually.
Yeah.
The disadvantage is you're not going to heat your pool up immediately. It takes time, as opposed to a gas thing. And then the other novel idea was you can actually use it to cool your pool if it gets too hot.
Well, yeah, they do
So-
that actually like in Arizona and places like that. They're using them to cool their pool.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that before, so I
Yeah.
thought that was kind
Because they
of,
could only, because the water becomes so hot.
Yeah.
In places like Phoenix and.
so what I'll do is I'll send this to you.
Okay.
I just
that sounds great.
skimmed what I
I'll have
put in there.
Simran
but-
work on it. She'll be in my office tomorrow.
Okay.
So if you can remember, send it to me tomorrow.
Okay, do we have any other business that we want to discuss tonight?
I do not.
Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second,
Okay, all in favor of adjourning now, say aye.
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 Anybody would like to stay longer, speak now. Hearing none, I adjourn the meeting.
All right, thank you, team. Nice work.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night, everyone. Good night. Bye.